was the last time you two saw each other then, kind of in person?
Yes.
Oh, yesterday.
Were you in the studio?
Yeah.
Well, home studio, but yeah. So I'm just going to grab these headphones, guys. 2 seconds.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, we were in the studio just trying to keep up with the ever-mounting pile of material we've set for ourselves to release. And then we realized at some point we need to finish it. So yeah, the finishing process is always like, that really important last 15%, 20% that kind of makes the song polished. So that's what we've been working on for the last 3 weeks or something like that.
It's fascinating the difference kind of getting the project over the line like that, just like that last 10%, like in any kind of creative form. Like the same with like films and stuff. Like when you just get that last 10% and it falls into place, like the same with music, makes a massive difference.
Yeah, I feel like whether it's film or music or, digital art or whatever the medium is, like the artist is always talking about that last 10 to 15. It's like, oh yeah, but it's not like, it's good, but it's not like there. And there's such a crazy difference between it being like absolutely polished and it being like, oh yeah, that's good. Like, everyone thinks it's done, but it's not.
You still got me here. Can you hear me okay?
Oh yeah.
Coming through loud and clear.
Loud and clear, sir.
Yeah, it's an art in and of itself, isn't it? Getting it that last 10% of the way there.
Yeah, it takes a lot of patience to not just say, okay, it's done. And I think a lot of you have to kind of like be willing to give up on yourself a little bit too. Like you have to admit that you had an idea that wasn't good enough and start all over again. And I think most of the time when I see people in studio fail to get to that last 10 to 15%, it's because they can't let go of anything. They can't swap anything out. Like Phil and I will have whole sessions where we're like, you know what? Like this song's entirely structured all wrong. I hate the pre-chorus and the bridge sucks. We're taking out all those parts. We're rewriting them, replacing them with all new production. And then we're re-going through all the other production to make it match.
That problem's like even more relevant here when you're in like LA, because there's such the like pop songwriter kind of circuits, and they have this kind of business model of like, you have to write a song a day. And I know John's done a lot of these sessions. I know I have, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just a different approach, but it is kind of weird being a fly on the wall for it a lot of times, or being in it, because it's this approach where, like, yeah, they just like, no one really cares about the quality of what you're working on. It's just about finishing it to say that you finished a song almost. Yeah,
it's as much about who's in the room as what you're actually doing, which is oftentimes reflected
it's really
in music,
strange. When you're doing it for your own project, I guess it's different because it's your thing and you can have those calls. So I get that it's like different if you're writing a song that isn't going to be for you, but it is strange when you're there and it's just like, cool, how about this? Yeah, cool. And then you're like, are we sure about that? Really? Like,
yeah.
No.
I guess LA can be a little bit of a yes culture as well, sometimes, maybe.
Oh my God. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Like in closed industry over here, just what Phil was talking about with like kind of the songwriter circuit, like quantity beats quality. It's almost kind of a ladder climbing energy you get from LA. And I've never seen that in any other city. I'm not sure if it exists in UK because I've never really spent time there. Yeah, it's a pretty uniquely bummer thing.
Do you learn things? We were saying earlier as well about how a lot of the work that you kind of done with strings before had been in those kind of writing sessions in the kind of more pop domain. Do you learn things by being present in that room and kind of tapping into your songwriting in a different way?
Yeah, I think it lets you flex in different muscles, like you take up little bits and you choose to not pick up little bits and you bring that back to your project. And with violin, I mean, it does literally help keep you in practice. It just helps keep your fingers moving. You don't want to lose that, especially now that we're not touring. Gotta keep playing somehow so I can stay fresh.
Is that how you came into contact with each other? Was it through a writing session in that way, in that domain?
No, it's actually from mutual. Well, kind of yes, kind of no. It was a mutual friend that introduced us at like a birthday party or like a hang or something, and then we both knew that we both, were doing music and all this kind of stuff. And then, if I remember rightly, I think the first time we hung out, I was actually trying to help a producer buddy of mine connect to a few top liners and writers. He was in town. Yeah, he was fairly. Right? He was in town doing some sessions, working on like a record, and he's an electronic artist, so he produces tracks and then kind of has these sessions with top liners. And he was asking me if I knew anyone, and I was like racking my brain. I was like, actually, I know this guy John. I was like, I don't really know him super well, but like seems like a good dude. And he's got a killer voice. Like I'm sure he'd be up for it. So I text John and we set it up. And yeah, we
spiraled out of control.
Yeah, we did that. That was how we kind of first started ripping it. But then actually, I'd say that after that, we didn't do anything for a little while. And then I kind of had this intention of doing some sync related music for one reason or another. And I just hit John up and was like, thinking, that was cool. And we worked with Fairlane. He's cool. Like, I wonder if he's down to just do some jams and see what happens.
So Phil comes in with this awesome like edge on his production, and I do a lot of piano and violin. And so I think the thinking, especially in the beginning, was like, you do kind of this cinematic movie score, trailer, music-esque, and we'll do a little sync project and we'll just keep it really small. And then we started working together and it got really out of hand really quickly. And we're like, all right, well, we got to brand it a little bit, even if it's a sync project. And then the branding got way too fun too. And then, after like 2 or 3 weeks, it was like, this is a full, like, screw everything else we've ever done. Like, this is like what we want to do now. So,
how do you define chemistry in that kind of environment, in that way you've been describing there? Not just the chemistry between you two, but that kind of spark, if you know what I mean, that you feel between people in a music-making environment.
I think a good way of being able to recognizing it is simply being able to recognize when it's not it. Like, as backwards as that might sound, like we've both done enough sessions and worked with enough people to have that frame of reference of like, I've worked with people where it's a vibe and I've worked with people where it's just really not. And so going into when me and John started working together, we kind of immediately knew it was working and it was a vibe. And it's a tough thing that especially when you're like first doing it, you kind of have this impression that like everyone you're going to work with, it's going to be like fun and it's going to work, and it's just not the case.
Or that like if it's not fun, it's a reflection of you. I do that too, like a lot doing like kind of the production circuit stuff. It's like it's kind of all on you to like make it fun, and it's like it can be a reflection of how good you are if it's not a vibe. But sometimes it's just like it's just not working. Even with really great musicians, like it's just
it
like
can be as simple as like
that,
taste. Like sometimes tastes just don't line up, and like someone's ideas aren't bad. It's just like you can just tell that whatever they're influenced by, whatever the lane they're trying to take with it, it's just not something you'd particularly understand or whatever. And then it's just this very kind of brick wall moment. But it was kind of
it's just not cinematic vampire rock.
Yeah, the big clue for us was that like in the first ever session we had to do it, we wrote the song "Can't Feel Anything," which is the first song we ever released, and another song called Castle, which we haven't released yet, but it's been one of our favorites since we started. And we did both of them on like the first day. So we were like, well, fuck, okay. Clearly something's working here. Like we're definitely sharing some sort of wavelength, because we busted those out like it was nothing. And they're two of our like favorite songs that I think either of us have ever written.
Yeah. I think when it happens like that, you kind of just know it when you know it. And like Phil said, it's easier for you to see it when you've worked in a lot of sessions where it ain't it, like it's not there. And being able to recognize when it is there and being able to pivot that into a project, I think is just like the really important element that I see a lot of people not able to do. Like they get a hold of something cool and new, or they have a new collaborator, but they want to hold on to their old, for instance, in me, it would be my old solo project, which I pivoted from like right away. And if I hadn't done that, I don't really know where we'd be today.
Yeah, but absolutely.
I think that's super important. Like being able to let go of stuff. It kind of goes back to like being able to drop your pre-chorus and delete the bridge at the last moment and redo everything, because it's just like not there yet.
Can't be pot committed on your music.
That's right.
I get it though. It's tough. Like if you've been ripping on something for like ages or working on a song for ages or a project, and then like something new comes along, like the idea of letting it go, it feels like this reverse waste of time that you've already invested so much time that you should carry on. But it's like, you know, that's been proven time and time again that whole like model doesn't work. There's no reward at the end of that path. Not always, anyway.
Scorch into the ground eventually.
You can only ever just go on your gut, and if you're feeling it, you just got to go for it. And I think with us, we were super lucky in this that there wasn't even a moment where we were unsure. I think it just like
definitely,
which made it so much easier. If it had been like kind of cool and we were like, oh, this is kind of cool, it'd have been like, what do we do here? But it was like, oh, this is so much fun. Like, I definitely want to do this.
It was too much fun.
That idea you were speaking of there, where you can't be precious with things and you have to be willing to cut a bridge or a pre-chorus, whatever, if it's not right for the song, can it sometimes be difficult to distinguish between what's good and what you just have a really personal connection to because you've been working on it for so long?
It's tough. It is tough, but I do think that, you know, people say this thing of like, there's no right way to do it. It's like, yeah, but there is a pretty fucking heavy blueprint that everyone's been following for the last like 20 years. Like, you know, if you're telling me the bridge is not long enough or too long, I could, you know, it's usually, I don't know, maybe it's just me, maybe I'm just cold. I'm just like, there is a way these things are done. And it doesn't mean you always have to follow the trend, but you know, if your bridge is 45 seconds long, it's probably a bit long, like whether it's cool or not, you know?
Right. I'm a bit less of a savage than Phil, but I do think that, I do agree with it. And I think it helps to have two people in the project too, because we have those moments, you know, even on smaller decisions where it's like, we're hyper analyzing the track and we get so in the weeds that one of us doesn't know if it's, you know, a necessary item and it strengthens the track, or have we just heard it 8,000 times in studio and we don't want to give it up.
Yeah.
And so that's when the other person could step in and be like, that's the dumbest riff you've ever written. Like, please delete it and we can start again.
Yeah. Those happen all the time and it's great.
Yeah, it's
and
good.
Thankfully, I'd say every time one of them happens, no matter how shocking it feels in the moment, whether it's me telling John something isn't working or John telling me something isn't working, and you're like, damn, I was like so into that. Within like 24 hours, you're always like, oh yeah, he was right.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
How do you approach that? How does that conversation begin where this maybe isn't quite working?
Definitely someone brings it up. And then the other person goes, oh yeah, God, I'm glad you said something because I was thinking about that too. And then usually we both have an opinion. And then there's this like critical moment where someone goes like, okay, well, how do you like, is this do or die for you? Like, how strongly do you feel? And then whoever feels like this is it, like I'm going to put my chip on this, like this needs to go or it needs to stay, then that person wins. And I think that's essential because even if the other person feels kind of some way about it, recognizing you don't feel as strongly as the other person and just kind of giving that up is like key. And I feel like that's how we make a lot of our decisions.
It definitely is. Yeah. It's like picking your battles. Like, you know, you don't want to like have it your way every time, because then that fifth time where you like actually really believe it's the right thing, you know, you can't just always have it. So on some occasions you got to be like, yeah, I don't think this is the move, but like, you know, it might be. That's cool. You know, let's do it.
Yeah. And honestly, if your judgment's cloudy on it, then maybe your opinion isn't sharp enough on that certain aspect of the song. Like if you're not totally certain and the other person is, like, that means they can hear it in their head and you can't, and you should follow their lead if you trust them, unless you're working with a, you know, idiot and then don't follow their lead.
Yeah, it's about having conviction both in yourself and on the other person.
Yeah, totally.
We mentioned Can't Feel Anything a little while back, which is an interesting one because it kind of also ties into the slight cinematic side to what we've been speaking about, in that the momentum of it and the pacing, it almost moves like a film trailer with the way it kind of goes through each stage of it, and then it all comes, you know, crashing in. What can you learn from those traditional techniques that would usually be applied to composing when you warp them into this kind of pop soundscape or pop rock, whatever you want to call it, soundscape?
That's interesting.
Almost kind of like the other way around. Like the pop side of you learns from, or at least from me, the pop side of you learns from injecting some of the more traditional like orchestration stuff into it. You add a bit more space and a little bit more breath and like a greater rise and a greater fall to stuff, like just higher dynamic stuff. Whereas pop is like, all right, cool. So we got this like sick 4-bar loop. Song's done. Can you write some lyrics over it? You know, and like, like sometimes, you know, obviously it's a lot more elaborate than that. But if you were to exaggerate it, like, I feel like injecting dynamics into pop by using some of those more traditional, like classical influences, it's kind of how it went for me, I guess. But that's a really good question.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, the thing with Can't Feel Anything was, as I said before, it was the first song we wrote, and that's when we still were writing with the intention of these songs being just for that purpose. Like we were just writing them to be for movie trailers or, you know, TV shows, film, that kind of thing. So we weren't as worried about it kind of having the more digestible edge. It was almost like in doing it, we listened to it back, and without kind of, even almost like without trying, we had like structured it like a pop song because that's just how we write. But it had all the like production and sounds of like a trailer thing. And that was almost like the spark that was like, oh damn, that's kind of a cool idea. If we did these like pop structured songs with melodies and lyrics, but they sounded a bit more like a movie trailer, like wouldn't that be a cool idea? So it's just like a little bit of each hand feeding the other. But yeah, I think back then we weren't really worrying about it too much. It was just sort of letting it happen.
And just like really not worrying about hooking people to. I think that was a big thing from the beginning, is like, we're going to build this world and people are going to find it. And we're not good. Like not everyone's going to be into our stuff. And that's almost the goal in a weird way. Cause it's like, if you're trying to please everyone, you kind of please no one. And so it's like, let's build this really cool world that's really intentional. And it's not, you know, trying to fight for people's attention. And we'll just build it track by track. And so we let go a lot of that like immediate pop hookiness. We kind of sacrifice that for this more like building higher dynamic song structure.
Does that change the role of what a first EP should be then, if you're kind of using it to lay the groundwork for this world that you're creating?
Yeah, a little bit, I'd say. It's kind of both, because in one way, you know, a first EP should just be like a cool, exciting introduction as to what a project sounds like. And I do think that's like what we did with it. And we try to cover all our bases where, like, you know, we do these dark, big drops and these, you know, theatrical feeling things, but we also love just writing like ballads, you know, we do love to do that too. So, you know, songs like Cold Sets In are on there as well, just to kind of, you know, show the range of what people could expect from it. But yeah, I mean, like you said, the aim of the EP really was that it wasn't a like, hey, here's an EP so we can end up on, you know, the viral chart right now. Like there's no song on that EP that's going to do that. You know, that's just, it's not that thing. And that's fine. You know, that's
like a trailer song on any Spotify playlist to me was so funny. I mean,
yeah,
it's like, it was so cool, but it was like, are you sure? Like, really?
So I guess, yeah, we just kind of wanted it to be like a cool kind of introduction to the soundscape. And then the whole world building thing will come in, you know, slightly after. And I think it'll give people a better way of understanding it from the start.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you mention Cold Sets In there as well, because that possibly has the most personal heart on the EP, while still giving us this introduction to the world. Is that ever, how do you kind of balance that, where you're including the personal but also allowing it to take place in a soundscape that is, by its very nature, quite theatrical almost?
Well, I feel like there's always going to be, you know, movies of any kind of genre, of course. Sounds like an obvious thing to say, but we really do approach it with this, like, when we're doing a song, whereas most people are typically writing about a personal experience, whether it's a breakup or a love story, whatever, we're kind of doing it from this very like visual perspective of like, let's do a song that like would fit a trailer for like a movie about a fucking guy in the woods being chased by a werewolf, or, you know, example, Cold Sets In, it's this like kind of perfect example of a, you know, a more emotional approach. And yeah, I mean, we definitely write personally and from experience like anyone would, but we are kind of thinking of it a little bit more in terms of like, what does this sound look like? Like if this was going to be for a trailer, like what movie would it be for? And let's try and get that kind of feeling in it.
Yeah, and it's not that we're literally even trying to make sync music anymore. It's like it's more like we're painting these little like movie vignettes, like where we've like taking these little paintings of stuff and like we're using that to express how the song flows and changes so that it has this like really cool cohesive character, and each song is kind of its own story. And we even have some like background lore and stuff that we're still building into, and we're making this world where these characters recur and they come back in through songs and music videos, and then they're mentioned in other ones, and it's all kind of subtle, but like even in these vignettes, like it's very theatrical, but like we do express like personal feelings and stories in them as well. I think like your personal experience, it's what theater is, right? It's like telling your story in like a very dramatic way so that it can be understood. And I think some of these vignettes do that as well.
Yeah. And it kind of, does it ever make it a little bit easier to be vulnerable too? Because you can kind of mask it in this fictional thing.
Definitely. I love hiding behind my fictional landscape. That's like my favorite thing.
Yeah. Good fun.
When did the logo, or is it a logo? How would you describe it? The kind of crest. When did that emerge?
The monogram. We've had that since like before we even launched the project. I mean, it sounds like an obvious thing to say because obviously we had to kind of do a whole logo brief beforehand. The monogram was definitely something that I was like determined for us to have. I just think, well, there's kind of twofold reason. One, on a more like obvious business side, it's like a super great thing for like branding and, kind of user interaction and a recognizable factor. And also the aesthetic of like what we're playing has this very kind of like bold kind of, even old school, sounds like this historical feeling to it. And, monograms typically are a little bit more of a historical form of a logo, I think, especially in the style that we have it. Like seal. It looks like a wax seal or something from like some weird king's crest or something. But the honest inspiration behind it, I'll give credit where credit is due. You probably even know them. There's a band from the UK called While She Sleeps, which was a band that I knew of and were kind of from my area and grew up with. And obviously they're still ripping and doing great. Sick band. And I just remember when I was like 16 or whatever, and they were popping off, they had this kind of like monogram-esque logo. And there was a moment there where like that thing was just everywhere. And to this day, it remains on all their merch. And, it was like you couldn't even go to a show without seeing like 5 or 6 hoodies or crew necks or t-shirts with that on the back or the front. And I just thought it was really cool. I just thought like, wow, that's so smart, man. It's like building an army or something. It's this like instantly recognizable thing, even more so than a logo or a traditional logo. And I don't know, I just thought it was really cool. So we kind of came at it with this like, yeah, I'd love to try and get a monogram. I'm not going to force it, but if we, can get one that works and looks cool. And then we ended up with that one. And I think we both just really liked it. I just thought it looked how the music sounded in my eyes. I don't know how or why. I saw that monogram and I was like, damn, that really feels like what this music sounds like to me. So let's rip it, let's do it.
If you're approaching each song as a vignette as well, it kind of gives something to help keep it cohesive and unify them all.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that's true. We're planning a lot of visual projects as well. And there are these recurring themes where like there's a very important, without giving too much away, but Phil's casting like a spell from a book and it's got the monogram like in blood stamped into the leather front, and there's like all this crazy recurring cool stuff that we can do with the monogram. It just helps bring that world together, tie everything up and make it cohesive.
Does that change the way you approach the songwriting when you think of it fitting into this grander picture? Like when you were writing this EP, did you have a sense of the full kind of trajectory of this project?
Ooh, that's tough. I think it affects it more now because when we were writing this EP, it was honestly like now it's so long. It was almost like a year ago that we were writing that. And that was when we were just writing the songs to kind of vibe out and see where they went, and where they ended up is where they ended up. And that's great. It was a little bit kind of as we drew to the end of that that's when we started implementing these recurring themes. Like, everything we're talking about with this lore and these recurring themes, technically, none of that's even out yet. It's all the stuff we're sitting on that's coming up. So yeah, I don't think it affected the EP too much, just because it was doing the EP that gave us the idea to like elaborate even further. But now, I don't think it stifles the writing too much, because we're not doing it in this like super aggressively forced way where like we can't do a song that doesn't fit into it, or like, it's not that aggressive in terms of the narrative or anything. But having said that, there is these recurring themes. We're working on a record that is that way, and so when we do lyrics, we do often have these little bits where we're like, ooh, would it be cool if we tried to like make this verse like somehow tie to this one? But I just think it makes it more fun. Yeah. It's like a challenge. It's like a mind exercise. Like, instead of just writing like, wow, 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 you broke my heart, wow, 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 we get to go like, oh shit, what if we try to write about that weird song that we wrote that sounds like it's in the woods, and take one of the lyrics.
Yeah. What if this what if this song is about the monster we were singing about in the verse of that last song? What if this is like the reverse perspective or something like that? I mean, it just lets you play with everything, like Phil said, and like swap stuff around, keeps it fresh.
Yeah, it's almost like you've created this framework that you can then be free in, if that makes sense. Like, you've set the parameters down, and then within that you've left yourself a lot of space to move around and play with things.
Yeah. Instead of just like, what should we write? It's like, well, I broke up with my girlfriend yesterday, so let's write about that. You know what I mean? There are these like crazy rules we can, apply to the music and work within.
Does it feel quite fluid though as well? Does it feel like it's still constantly changing the kind of parameters for what defines this?
I think so, yeah. As I said, with a concept record, I think you run the risk of going like too concept, and making it this like impossible narrative to follow along with. Or if you go too literal, you're just singing about names, and it can just get a bit confusing. So I think it's just like finding that balance between like having these ideas and trying to make them work in terms of lyrics and having them understandable, but also not like forcing it down someone's neck. Like, a song should always, if it's a concept record or a concept song, I think you should still be able to listen to a song at random and like be able to enjoy the song and understand its emotion, what it's about, without being like, what the fuck is he singing about? Because I have no idea what's going on here. Because no one wants that, like write a novel, but yeah, that's just my thing. So it's really, I like it though. It's almost fun. Like, putting yourself in these like parameters makes it more challenging, which is like, fun.
We're geeks, and we're super into like D&D and like Magic the Gathering and stuff. So the world building thing like kind of comes naturally, like, at least to me. I really like it, and I'm already, into that sort of like fantasy realm of stuff. So even if it's just for Phil and I to have fun making the music, you can step outside of that and get into this record, and like what the stuff we've got upcoming, and it's still totally like it should make sense. It's not like some insane like undigestible novel, like Phil was saying.
Yeah, you don't need to be a mage to be able to understand it or something. Yeah. That's funny.
What's recently kind of been the musical riddle, that you've had to solve, the kind of challenge that you've had to overcome? Something you've had to wrestle with musically lately?
How are we going to finish all these songs?
Yeah, for us, it's just about finishing. The way we write, we typically, we do these little things that we call writing camps, but it's literally just me and John in like an Airbnb. And we kind of write songs pretty quickly, but we don't really worry about the production too much. We kind of just write the top line, or, maybe there's a little bit of production going on if that's like part of the song, but we kind of just write a bunch of songs and then go back and kind of pick the ones we really like and develop them further. So yeah, I guess you're right, John. I think the biggest thing for us right now is just a case of like finishing stuff, because we're just sitting on like so many songs. But
yeah, although that being said, I think really the riddle that we haven't even really addressed too is, when we started this thing, live music was, and still is, I mean, it's the number one focus. Like, our live show, out of all the things that we do, should be the coolest thing, and it will be. It's the most important thing to both Phil and I. And then, obviously we can't do that right now. So when we decided, we delayed because of the pandemic, and then we decided to release in the pandemic anyways, because, we were brand new. We felt like we had to get the ball rolling, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that was a great idea, but it definitely left us with the riddle of, we kind of pinned everything leading up to this live show, and like that helped express what the music is really about. I mean, when these songs go live on a stage, they're going to sound like so much bigger than they do coming through Spotify, especially just because of their nature, like with the huge high dynamic stuff and the organs and string sections and everything. Like, it's going to be insane. It's going to be a mess, but now we can't do that. And so we've, been kind of solving the riddle of just like, we have to go even harder on making like cool visual content, and what can we do within quarantine to let people know kind of what we're about and like help build this world for them, for people who would be fans of this music.
Did you get a taste of that live setting when you did the kind of recent performance videos?
Oh, no. It's so different, having a camera in your face. It's a bit more controlled, for sure.
And those were like purposeful, like acoustic versions of the song. I know we call them the Twilight versions because we like to be fancy, but those were basically just stripped down versions of the song. So, I mean, it was still really fun, but it's not the same as doing it full force, as I'm sure.
Yeah, but going up there for like an hour and a half and just like sweating is like so much different. Yeah, and I really miss that. I know everyone's posting on Instagram like, wow, I miss this, like I miss live. But yeah, damn, I do. Just yesterday I was like having a beer with Phil, and we were talking about music, and I was like, you know what? Like if you told me that like no one would ever play live again, not that that's gonna happen, but like, if that in some alternate reality, like music just couldn't be played live, I don't know if I'd do it. Honestly, I'm not sure. I'm not certain that I would still do it.
That's interesting, because when you first start off playing, is that tapping into a live setting, or when you first start off right back at the beginning, is that you just writing in your bedroom?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it starts in the bedroom, but well, no, I guess not, because I did a bunch of classic stuff like repertoire. So I guess I did start in like a live orchestra setting.
I think it's a little bit of both. Like I got into music through like, the alternative scene, like bands like Blink-182 and Newfound Glory, and that was what inspired me to like pick up a guitar. And that's, the alternative scene, arguably more than any other, part of the music industry. I think the live element has always been the focus, and obviously it is with pop and everything too, but I think even more so with like bands. So yeah, it's always been super, super important to me. And it always has been this thing of like, you write music so that you can like tour it and perform it. Yeah, I definitely, I love them both. So yeah, if we could never do it again, I think I'd still make music, but I don't think it would be like the full-time thing. That you'd need some more fulfillment somewhere else, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of committed to music at this point, so I probably have to figure it out.
Yeah, the chips are in on that one, yeah.
Definitely.
It's an interesting mindset to put yourself in, though.
Yeah, I didn't have to think about that until, obviously the global pandemic started, and then I couldn't figure out why I felt so antsy and like awful, like 3 months in, just, on a personal level. And then I realized because, I hadn't played a show in like so long. And the music for a time there like didn't make sense to me, if that makes any sense. Like it didn't like, it was like, I was like sitting in front of Ableton and I'm like, fucking why? Like what's the point?
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Has it made you explore other forms of fulfillment in your life then?
Nah.
No, not for me. I mean, not anything that I wasn't doing before. I think probably just because like we both deep down know that like eventually live music will come back, and we got so wrapped up in this thing that like we were lucky enough that what we were doing, we were planning so far ahead that it's like it almost didn't matter in the first year that live music wasn't there. If anything, I'd possibly argue it was an advantage for us. It gave us an opportunity to just focus on the music and get it right and not be distracted by like trying to rush it out so that we could like play a show or something like that. Because I do think that tends to happen. Like but you want to get it done because you like believe in it and you're like, oh, this is sick, I can't wait to book a show. But it's like with us, because that wasn't an option, it was like, well, the only thing we can do is just keep working on this and try and make it better, and and then just look forward to the day that shows do come back, whenever that might be.
And by the time it shoots out the other end of the pandemic, like it's going to be such a different beast than when it went in, because we have had all this time to polish it and think about it and work on it. So
yeah, it'll be a really interesting time. Like I think we'll be a lot further into where you would be in a band's kind of trajectory, where you'd typically be playing shows. We'll be like so much further than that. It'll be a really weird day to think, like, whenever that day comes, like, man, we've already released this much music, we've done this, and this, and we literally haven't even played a show yet.
Yeah.
And normally in a usual world, that would be some sort of downside or like a weird, suspicious thing of like, oh, are you just like not going to tour this thing, or like what's going to happen with the live show? But as everybody knows, it's not a choice anymore. It's, why haven't you played a live show? Well, because nobody has, we can't. That's why, like,
it's illegal.
Yeah, like we literally can't. So yeah, it'll be interesting when it comes back.
Yeah, like you say though, if you're trying to build a world in that live setting, it could play into it as an advantage when the world is already quite fully formed in the music already.
Yeah, totally. That's the hope.
Do you normally get a different perception on the music when you perform it live, and you connect with it in a different way?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
I'm not really sure how to word it, but yeah, I mean, there are certain. I've always felt this, like with other bands that I'm big fans of. Like there are certain bands that like I will never listen to their Spotify. I never put them on. I don't have them in any of my playlists, and I'll book a ticket to their show every single time they come into town, because it's just like the live experience of certain types of music. Kishibashi's like that for me. Crazy violinist, like total rock star guy. And he's incredible. And like, I just like don't really do his stuff on record, as weird as that sounds, but like every single time he comes to town, it's insane. I mean, like his bass player does push-ups while he stands on his back and like shreds a violin solo and sings at the same time. Like, it's not only does it sound incredible, but like it really is like a theater performance. Yeah, I always feel like when I'm writing a song in the studio, like the whole time I'm just thinking about what it's going to be like on stage, because that's the end. That's like the maximum form, like the final evolution of the song is however it comes off on stage, and it's always a bit different than how it feels coming through your speakers.
Are you almost missing out on an element? Like, does that then feed back into the writing process and future material when you know how it kind of forms live?
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I feel like now, maybe not in the very, very beginning, because as we've kind of mentioned, we had a slightly different like motive at that point. But now that we are fully kind of committed to this project as being a project, it definitely feeds into it. Like, we constantly, when we're writing a new song, are thinking about a part and how it would sound live, or like even just structuring. And it's like, how would this sound on a stage if you were watching us and you didn't know who we were, and everything like that, giving fans those like moments. I think both John and I have had enough like experience now that we know what those moments are and when they need to be put in, or at least I like to think we do. Obviously that's somewhat subjective, but yeah,
we'll find out.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. But I don't know. I think it's just one of those things where we definitely do make decisions now in the writing process that like are for that. I can think of at least a handful of examples where we've been like, okay, let's do that now, because live, that will be such a like moment,
And we're going to change stuff live too. I mean, it's going to be a different animal on stage. Some almost literally too. I mean, there are songs where we're going to add whole sections that there just aren't on record. So the whole thing should feel different. Like, you should get something from our show. We're not going to go up there and like regurgitate the album. Like, that's not how a live show works in my head. Like, it's going to be a totally different beast.
Yeah, I guess if the music is kind of structured in a slightly different way in its presentation, you maybe need to tweak it slightly so that it sees through its full potential in that domain.
Yeah. But it also gives us like an extra string to the bow, where like, because of how cinematic it is and that kind of angle, we can use that to our advantage. And we want to do really, these are kind of fun, really cinematic interludes that, tie the songs together. And, maybe we're playing one song and you're recognizing it and you're singing along, having a good time. And then rather than end it, we can go into these really kind of orchestrated moments that build into the beginning of another song and just like make it really fun, like make it feel like a trailer score, like this thing that just keeps moving and is flowing. And I think that's something that we can do that, like, bands have done it before, sure, but I think it just would complement our sound a lot more than it might other bands, just because we're lucky that we do that kind of sound anyway,
Again, it comes back to what we've been speaking about with the world building. Are there breakthrough moments on this kind of trajectory so far where it's kind of fundamentally changed things in the way that you're looking at this kind of broader canvas that you're trying to construct?
Yeah, I think so. I think things really, like, it's kind of like what Phil was saying when, we started working on the first EP, things definitely felt and looked a bit different up until now. And there were just certain moments, like, I can't speak too much on them without like giving a bunch of stuff away for future material, but like where we sort of like realized this idea and they're like, oh my gosh, like we can build so much around that. Like we can center so much of the material on that and pull from it and like help it flush out and paint in the color in this world. And that's, it's all been headed in the same way, but it's definitely like shot off, forward in like certain directions at certain critical moments of just realizing like, whoa, that's really cool. Like we could do a lot with that.
It always just comes back to this, like, we're just trying to make a project that we think would be cool. Like that's always kind of had the aim. Like it's this world building thing. Like it is very organic, and it's like it's our interests coming into one. Like John, we're both into D&D and all that kind of stuff, but John's a little bit more invested in that than I am. But then I'm way more invested in like horror movies and being like a cinephile. So it really is just us trying to be like, oh man, like I would love it if a band did this. And if we like
it's entirely a selfish project.
Yeah, basically. We're just making something like, that we would think is cool. And
and like if other people want to join, like they're so welcome.
And if they think we're weird as fuck, then they're probably right.
Is the kind of D&D influence, is that where a lot of the kind of classical imagery in terms of, you kind of reference and use like ice and fire a lot in it, is that where that's kind of pulling from as well?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. It's an amalgamation, but there's definitely an influence there, and this sort of like grand, fantastic scale that we want to put this project on pulls a lot from D&D and, novels and like, you name it, Tolkien-esque.
Yeah, it definitely, like, I think there's the whiff of a flavor of it in the EP, but the next kind of stuff that's coming is like, we've really cranked it to 11, like lyrically, especially, like there's not as much ambiguity anymore. Like we are straight up singing about that stuff.
Why does the EP come first? And are these the first songs that you kind of wrote and that's where they're being presented to us in this way? Or why did you decide to come in with it instead of going straight in with the big kind of full realization you're speaking about, the new stuff?
Yeah, it's more than just that realization came naturally a little bit later. We did the first EP, and in doing it and getting wrapped up in it and having so much fun making it, that wave of like, this is what it sounds like, didn't satisfy us for long enough. That made us really excited for a bit. And then we just couldn't help ourselves. And we just naturally were like, oh, but what if we did this? And what if we did that? And I think it mostly started because we wrote this one song, which isn't out yet. So, I won't speak on it because it wouldn't make any sense. But there was one song that I think really kind of started it. And on that occasion, I think it was sort of, I don't want to say an accident, because we talked about this idea of having this kind of fantasy lore kind of influence, but that one kind of really brought it into the real thing. And then from there, we just got so psyched on it that like all the songs we were writing felt like that. And then everyone you write and every lyric that says something cool, you're like, oh damn, like this could tie to this. And before we knew it, it was just this kind of all-encompassing thing. But yeah, it was more that it just like it came a little bit after, rather than like it was always there and we're staggering it out slowly.
It's almost taken a life of its own.
Yeah, very much so.
How does that change the atmosphere in the room once it does that? once it does take on a life of its own, it kind of gathers this momentum and it's powering forth.
Yeah, we just get really excited.
Yeah, we geek out pretty hard when we write one of these songs.
Like, oh my God. I mean, there's some like lyrics in those that I was like, man, I can't believe that's actually on the page. Like that's, some of it you won't even really notice, but if you read the lyrics, you're like, what is this?
That's almost like the part I'm most proud of. Like, I think not anyone, but like going and making a band, like it has been done before in some degrees and different kind of fashions, but like being able to have it be about like fantasy stuff and have these lyrics involved, but like we said earlier, also make it's not so aggressive that like if you weren't interested in that, you wouldn't understand it. Like it's this really small target to hit of trying to like have it be about that and literally talking about that whilst it's also veiled as like a metaphor for something else. Like you could easily make the argument like this song is about a breakup, or this song is about somebody who cheated, or this song is about loss, or whatever it is, but just kind of in the guise of these fantastical lyrical concepts.
Yeah, you're contextualizing your story in someone else's or in this other world.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. I mean, but isn't that just what fantasy is about anyways? Like, you don't watch Lord of the Rings because you think you're an elf. Like, you watch it because it's cool and you relate to the characters and the struggles and and then totally. it's just gilded in this awesome ice and fire.
But they get 3 hours to tell a story and we get 3 minutes.
That's right.
Does that not make it a little bit more powerful though? If you're able to compress all of that into this 3-minute thing?
Yeah, I guess so. It depends which way you look at it. But I guess that's why we also tie songs together, because the Tolkien reference is a really great one, and for me, a lot of vintage horror and even new horror, the new kind of A24 horror movement. It's just shows like American Horror Story, where it's all these different things that tie together. There's just something so cool about watching something or listening something, and you have that little moment where you're like, oh my God, they're referencing something else I know. It's this very strange psychological moment where you almost feel like you won something, or it's this instantly gratifying moment where you feel like you know something somebody else doesn't, and you're part of something and you get it. And I don't know, it's such a hard thing to explain, but when I'm watching these movies or these TV shows and that moment happens for me, I love it. That's when I'm entrapped in a show. And if we can do that with music, I think that's just the coolest thing.
Oh, yeah, I agree.